So you might be saying to yourself, who was that shredding that guitar and singing like that? That was our very own Dan Dietrich, by the way. And my name is Doug Padgett. And if you're new to our get-togethers here on Tuesday nights, it's the Vote Common Good effort to try to ask one another, what is our call? How should we live our lives, especially as it comes to this election? And we call our Tuesday night electionaries a biblical reflection for this election, and we ask people to guide us through that process. Tonight's electionary passage that we'll look at is brought to us by Lisa Sharon Harper, who might be joining us later, but she has prepared this the piece for us that we'll see in a little bit. And we also wrap together some music, some conversation, prayer, all together here on these Tuesday nights. So we're super glad to have you along with us. And that very Dan Dietrich that I just mentioned to you is also one of our live musicians. Sometimes people record ahead of time this music, and sometimes we do it live. I think it's just really a great experience to have people lead music right from their own basements or attics or apartments or living rooms, because it makes you feel like even in the midst of this pandemic and even in the midst of all of this strife that so many of us feel for a better world, that we can join together in what's being made and created right on the spot from the inside of people's houses and dwellings and lives. So Dan, thanks a lot. I don't know if you can tell us anything about this song, but thanks for providing a little music for us tonight.
Yeah, it's actually going to be an acoustic version of that song you just heard in the prelude there.
Oh, excellent.
But it felt like an appropriate evening for a lament. And so this is a song I wrote kind of modeled after the psalmists who would cry out to God. So if you're listening, if you're watching with us, if you want to just take a couple deep breaths and hear the words of this psalm, and then I'll go ahead and sing this song as a lament for all that's happening in our nation and world. So here's Psalm 69. It says, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths where there's no foothold. I've come into the deep waters, the floods engulf me. I'm worn out calling for help, my throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for my God." And it goes on to say, "The poor will see and be glad. You who seek God, may your hearts live. The Lord hears the needy and does not despise his captive people." I was alone, but never afraid. I was alone, but never afraid. I was alone, but never afraid. 'Cause the Lord promised to save me. I was let go, a foot in the grave. I was let go, a foot in the grave. I was let go, a foot in the grave. But the Lord promised to save me. Save me, save me, reach into the grave and raise me. Save me, reach into the grave and raise me. My eyes were full of ruin and war. My eyes were full of ruin and war. My eyes were
throwing in. Oh, and I cried out, where are you, Lord? Save me, reach into the grave and raise me up. Save me, reach into the grave and raise me up. Save me, oh save me, reach into the grave and raise me up. Oh save me, oh save me, reach into the grave and raise me. And I cried out, where are you, Lord? And I cried out, where are you, Lord? And I cried out, where are you, Lord?
Thank you, Dan Dietrich. And what we know, and maybe some of the viewers don't know, is that you're in the heat of Indiana and you turned off your air conditioner to do this. So that sweat that they're seeing on your face is a very real thing. On each of our Tuesday nights, we ask someone to give us a framing of where do we find ourselves? What's the circumstance that we're in? And Amy Sullivan's going to be the one to do that tonight. So, hey, Amy, thanks for framing us in a place tonight.
Well, thanks for asking me. I feel like there are a number of ways that we can chart where we are right now. Personally, since our community went into shutdown because of COVID-19, I've been keeping what has turned into an unintentional diary on Facebook, where I note that we're in quarantine day 93 or whatever it is today. But I also feel like we are in a new era, with day one being Memorial Day. And so we're still figuring out whether this is momentary or whether we are seeing the seeds of real change in lots of different areas of life, in lots of different parts of the globe, but particularly in the white church. I think this is a time to step up. And it's too soon to know what responses will end up carrying the day and shaping the church going forward. But we've seen enough so far to know that while some people can step up to the challenge and embrace self-reflection and self-criticism and a new role, a role that maybe means taking a back seat, a lot of people cannot. And so I wanted to just briefly mention a few things that have been on my radar, because I have been grieving for years now what Christian witness looks like to most of the world. And every time one of these things comes up, every time I I go on social media and I see that Franklin Graham is trending. I know that's not good for Christian witness. And in fact, when I did a little Googling to find out why Franklin Graham was trending today, my cynical instincts were rewarded. I did subsequently do a little digging to see if he has spoken out at all about the protests going on, about the violence that we have seen. He did have something to say right after the murder of George Floyd, and expressed dismay about that. But he's been much more eager to back up the president from his photo op with the Bible, to declare that God is the only way out. Certainly not systemic change. It's just we all need to have a little more faith. And so it wasn't surprising to see him respond to yesterday's Supreme Court ruling extending employment discrimination protection to our LGBTQ sisters and brothers, by reacting about what it meant for him and lashing out at the fact that his rights are the ones that should be protected, and that this would mean it would do damage to Christianity. And my prayer every day is that Graham and his fellow travelers would be able to see the damage that they do to Christianity. And through that, the damage that they do to their brothers and sisters in Christ. Every time they imply that it is God's will that Donald Trump be in the White House. Every time they imply that it is God's will that the most vulnerable among us be oppressed, and that law and order rule the day over lives. That's paired with another example that came up just in the last few days of an Atlanta-based pastor, Louis Giglio, who was wrestling, and I can't know, so I won't characterize whether it was sincere or not, but wrestling with how to talk with his congregation about race and about the role of the church and the role of history. And he said, white privilege, there's just something about that phrase that makes people uncomfortable now. Probably because conservatives have spent a few years dragging it through the mud and implying that anybody who uses that phrase is godless and a liberal and probably a communist. But he suggested that white blessing was probably a better phrase because that would make people a little less uncomfortable. And again, I pray that we can get to a point where Christians may be known for caring more about the rights of others than about protecting their own, and caring more about the common good than about their own very narrow little sphere, and caring more about the sin that is done in their name than about their comfort and fragility. And we're not there right now. We may be still a very far way off. But that's where I see us a few weeks into the new normal. I'm heartened when I look at scenes from Washington, D.C., which was my home for more than 20 years. I'm heartened when I see scenes from around the world of people pushing back, sometimes it does take knowing that there are other people willing to step forward to give people a little courage. We associate groupthink with cowardice, but I think we're seeing some courage around the world. Long delayed, long overdue, but some courage. And we can just hope and pray that some of that courage will be found within white Christianity. And until then, those of us who define ourselves within Christianity, without the qualifier, will lead the way.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to have your thoughts and reflection. We like for all of us to have a chance to give some commentary on where you see us, where you think we find ourselves, where on this particular night, on June 16th, 2020, when this group of people has gathered with these people watching at this time, where do we find ourselves? Maybe a reflection on Amy's comments or maybe some words of your own. Panelists and others, where are we?
I'll speak to that. Amy, that was very insightful and beautiful. And I love that when you said, I wish that we could get to a place where we consider taking care of someone else just as or more important than taking care of our own. And I would love if we could see that as taking care of our own. If taking care of my neighbor or my brother or someone who doesn't look like me or someone I've never met, if I'm fighting for them just as hard as I would fight for my own children, then that means that we do have faith in the promises that were made to us. We do believe that we're being protected by a higher power. We do believe those things. And it's not leaving it up to us. It's leaving it all up to God. We just got to do our job and protect each other and look out for each other and let God take care of us. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Thank you, Mia Pace. Others, where do we find ourselves?
I'll go next. And I thank you, Amy, for those very powerful words. I had the chance this afternoon, I was invited to do a podcast on politics done right. And I told the person who hosts this show that I wanted my son to do the podcast. My son's 27 years old, and some of you know he's Black, and he was shot 2 years ago. And so he and I did the podcast together. And, you know, I listen most of the time. My son's not a public speaker. He's a cook at a restaurant. But, you know, when we talk about the younger generation stepping forward, and I was just so moved by listening to him and his sharing about what it meant for him being a Black person growing up in a white household and how that affected who he is today. And also sharing about how just incidences of how he would be with white friends and he'd be singled out. He noticed being singled out. He noticed being treated differently. Most of us, you know, other than Mia and Michael, would notice that when we're with our friends, or, you know, we would notice that they maybe are being treated differently than we are. But he talked about that, you know, what really has affected him is noticing how he's treated differently when they're at a store or at a restaurant or anywhere else. So I think we sort of have to, you know, just keep that in mind. And as we talk about the white church, I also had a chance last night to get together for a socially distancing glass of wine with a dear friend of mine, who's a Franciscan sister and a theologian, and I think one of the most brilliant thinkers. Some of you may know her, Ilia Delia. And Ilia started talking about how we need to rethink our whole theology. And if we're going to move forward, it has to start with our religion. and that we can't have the same old religion. We have to rebuild our religion to get back to the message that Jesus gave us, not the message that as a Catholic, the hierarchical Catholic Church or the Franklin Grahams or any of those people. And we have to start doing that, or we're just going to keep going in circles and never really get anywhere.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, I think we have time for one more if somebody wants to share, and then we're going to hear from that Mia Pace and Mario in song. But somebody else like to share?
Amy, again, I want to thank you for your very powerful words today. And Patrick, I think that's right. If I was going to define this moment, I think we are in a new wine era, and we're fighting against folk who are really in love with old wine skins. I think that defines this moment. We have opportunity to break forth into something brand new. And that's a challenge for some people because they are restricted in their imagination to recognize that what we have pales in comparison to what can readily be. We have a chance to reimagine what policing looks like in our society. We have an opportunity to reimagine what is church and what we're called to do as church. We have an opportunity to reimagine our nation. And I think that in some regards is the genius of America, is that every so often generations arise that have an opportunity to reimagine, to re-envision what we could be, that challenges us to move beyond what we have been. And sometimes that imagination that breaks forth is so powerful because it causes us literally to see something that has not been. But we come in a great tradition of those who were abolitionists, who saw freedom in the midst of the antebellum period, those who saw a desegregated society when segregation was marked out with clear signs. And now we have an opportunity to imagine a diverse and equitable society that really makes room for everyone and leaves no one behind. We have an opportunity to imagine a nation, a beautiful nation, where health care is a right. We have an opportunity to imagine, even in the midst of this pandemic, an opportunity where you are deserving of a guaranteed living wage, where we no longer minimize what you can earn, but we ensure that you do earn what is necessary for you to live and to thrive. And so this is a challenging time without question, but it's also a time pulsating with creative genius. And we are the new framers of a new society. We're daring to pour new wine into new wineskins. And I'm truly hopeful that with the help of God, we will accomplish even beyond our wildest imagination.
Thank you, Michael. Well, every movement needs a soundtrack, and any soundtrack I want to be a part of has Mia Pace on it. So, Mia, if you would.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, everyone, for showing up tonight. I'm still in this place where I'm feeling the energy of what's going on around me in this whole movement, this Black Lives Matter movement. And there are definitely some human beings out there that still aren't getting it. And maybe you may have friends who are Black people or in your church or somewhere. So tonight I wanted to sing this song that are the words of Ella Baker. It's called Ella's Song. But I'd like to do this when I sing it because, maybe you know me as Mia, and you know me and you see me, in my dress and I'm at church and I'm singing, or I'm on the bus, I have my earrings on or my lipstick. But I'm also this person too. And I walk around like this. And to someone else, I might not be Mia Pace, someone's friend, Mia Pace, someone's daughter, Mia Pace, the girl who likes to sing music at rallies. I might be a threat. Without even opening my mouth, just walking down the street. Someone's gonna see me like this, and they might call the police, or they might feel threatened, or a cop might pull up and they might feel threatened. So I'm gonna do with Mario Andreoni here on guitar. We're going to sing Ella's song. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be just one in the number as we stand against tyranny. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. If I could just shine a light on as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. I'll bow to no man's word. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
Mia and Mario, that is fantastic. Thank you. I mentioned that we asked someone to give a reflection, biblical reflection for this election period, and our guest commentator tonight is Lisa Sharon Harper. Some of you who've been around the Vote Common Good world, around some of the things and the organizations that we partner with, will know Lisa well. If she's new to you, you're going to be in for a really great experience with Lisa. So here's her piece. We asked people to do 7 to 9 minutes. Hers is 7 minutes, so prepare yourself for a really great experience. Here's Lisa Sharon Harper.
Hello, my name is Lisa Sharon Harper, and I'm here to give you the lectionary for this evening. Our scripture this evening is Genesis 1:26 through 31. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that God had made, and indeed, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. So my reflection for this evening really has to do with the question of dominion and voting. Why is voting so important? Because in a democracy, it's the most basic way possible for human beings to be fully human. You see, in a democracy, every single person who is a citizen in that democracy has the ability to exercise dominion within that land. That's why voting is so important. And that's why voting in this election is so important. You see, what we see in Genesis 1:26 through 31 is we see a picture of what very goodness looks like, because God says at the very end, whoa, this is really good. And those words, very good, are not just, that's pretty good, that's okay, that's really great. No, that word good actually means that there is good relationship between all things. The goodness there is located between things, not just in the thing itself. And what that looks like is that there's good, overwhelmingly good, actually. That word me'od, very, means forcefully good. There's forcefully good relationship, relatedness between humanity and God, and men and women, and all of humanity, and all the rest of creation, and all of creation, and the way things work, the systems that govern us, all worked to bless all on the first page of the Bible. So here we see that what it looks like to be a blessing, what it looks like to live in overwhelmingly good relationship with each other, is for humanity to be recognized, all humanity to be recognized as being made in the image of God, and for humanity's capacity, inherent, divinely ordained capacity to exercise dominion, to be served and protected and cultivated. And that looks like making sure that everyone can read that ballot. So we have to have good education. It looks like making sure that we have great health care in the COVID era, that enough people are here to actually vote, that we don't lose people to crowds without masks, that we don't lose whole populations of black and brown bodies who die at an inordinate rate in comparison with people of European descent in the United States because of the lack of healthcare on the front end. It looks like making sure that gerrymandered districts are ungerrymandered. It looks like making sure that Russia is not fiddling with our voting machines. It looks like protecting the capacity of every single citizen to vote and making it easier, not harder. Because what it looks like for the human spirit to flourish is to be able to exercise dominion, to be able to exercise stewardship, to be able to exercise agency, to make decisions that impact the world. That's what it looks like to exercise radah. That's what it looks like to have an election where all of the images of God within that land flourish. So your electionary reflection for the day is on radah, that's the Hebrew word for dominion, and let them have dominion. That word is representative figure. That word immediately democratizes power on the first page of the Bible. So let us work toward true democracy in 2020. Let us work toward the pushing back of voter suppression, voter intimidation, and de facto voter loss through COVID-19. Let us protect ourselves by staying in place, staying home in place until there is a cure, until there is a vaccine, until there is at least a medical remedy. And until November, let us also make sure that we are holding our representatives to the fire to protect our elections, to get enough voting booths in each precinct, to make sure they all work, and to make sure we have enough precinct workers to be able to tally the votes of the images of God in the United States of America. God bless you. Thank you.
That is Lisa Sharon Harper. And panelists, we're going to respond now, and then we'll do our prayer moment here in a bit. But your thoughts on Lisa's electionary tonight. I really connected with this idea, never thought of it before, the democratization as being a way of empowerment, and to connect that to the root of our faith, that when you allow people to help select their leaders and to express their voice, that can be rooted in a deep spiritual tradition. I thought that was great. And then this idea of all blessing all. I've had the privilege of listening to it a couple of times today, so I had a little head start on thinking about it. But I thought those ideas really rang true for what it feels like we need to live in a world where everyone has enough and no one needs to be afraid. That if we're going to get to a world with that kind of a vision, it's going to take the comments that Lisa was sharing tonight. Others, your thoughts on what you heard from Lisa Sharon Harper?
I'm appreciative of the very careful exegesis that was given, very powerful presentation. I think the two most compelling rally cries of movement that I've heard or seen were from the 1968 sanitation workers strike. The sign simply says, "I am a man." And the declaration we hear today, Black Lives Matter, right? Not these overarching grand statements, just a very clear, decisive statement about what matters. And we see that statement, I think, in that Genesis story, which she so wonderfully unpacked, right? This idea that humankind is created in the image of God, and because of that, we have value. We are valued divinely, and we ought to value each other, because when we look upon each other, we're seeing reflections of the divine. So I'm so grateful for that. And if we can kind of close the gap between our understanding of that text, I really appreciate it. All this is established on the first page of Genesis, she says, which is powerful. I love that line. This is early stuff, right? If we can reaffirm that, then we can do away with quite a number of the divisions and harms that we continue to recycle across our nation. Job well done. That was quite a blessing.
Others, do you have reflections on what you heard from Lisa?
Yeah. So, I, as a pastor who's spent the last 25 years crafting sermons and coming up with always asking the question, like, what do I want people to do? Like, what's the real life outworking of this? What's the practical application of this? How does this work in life? I was fascinated to hear Lisa say, like, as she enumerated the practical implications, the practical applications of the text that she brought for us. Like, they included things like ending gerrymandering and making sure that there's enough ballot boxes and voting booths, especially in districts that have been marginalized, and we have states that have made it more and more difficult for people to vote, especially people of color. Like, I love the idea that, like, the living out of this goodness, the living out of the dominion that we have, the stewardship, the nurturing that we have in the world includes those very practical things, that making sure that our system works well, that our system is good. Because there's a lot of things right now in our system that are not good. And we've got to improve that. We've got to make a difference.
Thank you, Rob Ryerson. Anyone else?
I was struck by something Lisa said near the very beginning of her remarks, which was the idea that God did not survey all he had created and say, you are good, and you are good, and you are good, but that the connection between everything was good. And I think, especially when we hear people talk about their community as being chosen by God, and having a particular connection that others lack. It is that much more important to remember that it is not just having ourselves rise to the level of being considered good by God, but it is remembering that it is our connections to everyone else. And something I had meant to mention in my reflection earlier, and did not, is that tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of the massacre at Mother Emanuel, which, it's tempting to say, reflects brokenness of that connection, except that I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that for many people in this country, that connection has ever existed. I don't think you could sit in a prayer meeting for an hour and see those other people around the table as the image of God and then massacre them. So it's just a reminder of the job before us, and seeing not only the worthiness of our own souls and our own beings, but it does no good to do that if you can't see it in the other.
You know, it's something I was reflecting in Lisa's thoughts and then a conversation afterward, that for a lot of people of Christian faith, they want to be very careful to be sure that they confess that they see Jesus as the Son of God and to see the humanity in Jesus, and then will so often easily set aside that very presence of God in someone else. And you can't make your way much from the beginning of Genesis through the rest of the story and be allowed to do that with impunity. But it's so easy to not see the interconnectedness of the divine and the presence of the divine in all things. And you should think that to be reminded of it in the case of Jesus as the Son of God, to also see that in the brothers and sisters that Jesus claims all humanity to be. Feels like it's one of those moments that we're all called to, the calling up, the aiming a little higher with what we ask of ourselves and what we ask of our fellows and others on this planet, and of our faith. So anybody else with a thought or comment? And if not, we'll move on to our prayer tonight.
Let me jump in here just briefly, pulling in a piece from what Amy said about the abysmal nature of the generic Christian witness, and tying it into Lisa's commentary and a little bit of yours. I heard someone say along the way a need for new theology. It's just occurring to me that the root of this problem theologically and then politically is the sense of zero-sum game, the sense of triumphalism that seems to be deeply embedded in Christianity. And it occurs to me that triumphalism is perhaps antithetical to the love that was modeled by Jesus. And yet Christians are always focused on this glorious finish in which they triumph and so many others do not. And so that creates the need for losers. Triumphalism must have losers. And we see that in our politics and in our nationalism. America has to be the best. It's got to grind everyone else to dust. And maybe we have Christianity in a false Christian theology, perhaps to blame for that 200 years on.
Well, thank you, Rod Colburn. That's a great introduction to the prayer we have for tonight, which comes from Caitlin Curtis. And Caitlin is a writer in the Atlanta area, where Rod is currently living. She has authored a couple of books, one called Native: Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God. Part of it is her own story of recognizing her native heritage that she knew as a child and had rediscovered the importance of as an adult. An amazingly powerful book. And then one called Glory Happening: Finding Divine in Everyday Places. And the prayer we're going to read tonight, we're going to read in a collective fashion. So we will each be taking on a passage for tonight. And this is a prayer, a blessing that Caitlin put together for a holiday time a couple of years ago. And like many profound thoughts, it carries to a moment like we find ourselves in now. So here it is, a holiday blessing, originally written by Caitlin Curtis. May our white fragility dissipate into humble listening and learning.
May truth-telling come as a kind of invitation to a better life.
May a prophetic vision of wholeness guide us home.
May we hold space where we did not know we could.
May our feasting always be full of flavor and full of love.
May our grief lead us to community where it wasn't before.
May patriotic nostalgia be replaced with a future for all.
May family feuds remind us that family is chosen and made.
May mystery beckon us to the quiet places of sacred belonging.
May our path be always together, onward, kinship leading us.
May the boundaries created by hate evaporate in the light of a new day.
Yeah, doesn't that feel about right? So we can add our collective amen to that. Mia Pace, would you take us out with a serenade tonight?
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to do this one that I love and I know a lot of people love, and I mentioned getting on board. And I hope everybody will get on board. Yeah. There's a train coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith. You hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. You just thank the Lord. You just thank the Lord. There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who would hurt all mankind just to save his own. Have pity on those whose chances grow thinner, but there's no hiding place against the kingdom's throne. So people get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord.
Yes. Hey, I got lots of things happening in the world of Vote Common Good, including a lot of us participating tomorrow in a training that Jackie Lewis is hoping to lead on anti-racism. It's an anti-racism training. It's a Wednesday and Thursday night. You can look in the places where you found this feed or any of the other places that that Vote Common Good directs you, and you'll find links to that if you're interested. And we're looking for many ways to connect. We're going to be spending a lot of time and energy in the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida. We're going to find ways to do that fit the COVID-19 situation and the need and demand to do what we can to make a change through faith, hope, and love on Election Day. The implications are very high for how this country is going to act and treat one another and treat the planet and treat people around the world. And we are in perhaps the most significant 5 months of the future of this country that we have faced in a very long time. So we're going to do all that we can to engage, and we so appreciate you all being a part of this on these nights, panelists. Great to have all of you, and all of you have been with us on Facebook and are watching this on video. We consider you to be part of this effort, and thanks so much for being a part of it. So have a great night, everybody.